One of the central questions in philosophy is the nature of justice. In the Republic, Socrates has this famous example that we generally would think that justice is giving back what you borrow or giving people what's owed to them. But let's say you've borrowed a weapon from a friend, you borrowed or even a kitchen knife, and he comes in a crazed state to you and says, I want my knife back. I'm going to kill that guy. That it seems like it's actually unjust to give him the knife, that you would become, complicit in a wicked deed. It seems generally we'd say that justice has something to do with, paying back things or giving people what's owed to them, but maybe it's hard to say what is owed to somebody. So I want to focus on an economic justice question. How do I determine what I owe to somebody when buying and selling things? So let's make a concrete example. Let's imagine your neighbor has a car that he wants to sell, and you are in need of a car, and the two of you are trying to determine how much it's worth. Well, what would you do? You could say, you could look at a Kelley Blue Book guide. You could look at similar vehicles for sale on Craigslist or on some other sort of some sort of site, and take a value from there. You could take it to a mechanic, somebody who could examine it and look at how well it's running. So that might be a place to start, that a fair price seems to be something about how much it's worth in the community I live in. So sort of supply and demand and these sorts of things. But I think, aren't there other factors we'd want to consider here? I mean, so this is a neighbor and he's a friend, someone that you want to be fair toward. And I'm going to give some basic principles and scenarios from St. Thomas Aquinas' teaching, one of the great Catholic philosophers in the 13th century, and just see what you think of them. So Aquinas does start with this roughly a market price kind of idea of value, something about how much things are needed in the community, although he'd want to qualify that in a certain way, which I won't go into now. But he adds a few things here. So first, let's say that your neighbor really needs the money. He needs both a car and money, but he has to trade one for the other. So he's indifferent. He needs to pay his rent, whatever it may be. And he says, I know that this car is probably worth $1,500, but I really need $2,000 in terms of the loss that this car will bring to me, my needs for the rent, and just generally that this car is worth more to me than it is to Kelley Blue Book value or Craigslist or whatever it may be. Aquinas would say that this is fair. This is actually just for him to ask, not only based on the value, kind of this neutral value, but also value to yourself. But on the other hand, let's say he knows that I really need a car and I have $2,000, but the car is only worth $1,500 and he doesn't really need the car. For him to ask me for more money based on my need would be unjust, Aquinas says. And this would rule out things like, I'm in the desert, I'm dying of thirst, and you have plenty of water, it won't harm you in any way to give me some, and you ask for, $1 million for a bottle of water, knowing that, what am I going to do? I guess I could die. Aquinas would say this is unjust, and Aquinas even goes on to say that it would be just for me to take somebody else's property in a case of need. So in a case like this, if I stumble across your well and I drink some of your water, this would not be unjust. I wouldn't be treating you unjustly by doing this. So those are some basic principles that Aquinas uses for justice, and we can add two other things. Gratitude. Let's imagine I buy the car from you, and you and I think this thing is a clunker. It's going to last 2 years or a very short time, and 10 years later I'm still driving it, and I've put almost no money into it. It's really just been a winner. You would owe a debt of gratitude to your neighbor. It's not unjust that you only paid $1,500 for it, but there may be a kind of moral justice or a moral due to be grateful in some way toward your neighbor, whatever way that would be appropriate to that. A second thing, and I'll conclude with this, is I'm going to argue, Aquinas doesn't talk about this, that this would make scalping immoral, unjust. Now, scalping, since when I was young, scalping was illegal in all its forms, as far as I knew at least. But now I've discovered that scalping is legal. You can go to the Pittsburgh Pirates website or some other concert site and be linked to scalpers, and buy their tickets at exorbitant prices in some cases. Scalping is immoral, I would say, because what the scalper does is, in a case where it's clear that the event will sell out, is hoarding up the goods before others get there, and then turning around and selling it at an exorbitant price without performing any service. So this would be different from something like, in the old days, I remember waiting in line all night for concert tickets, and you'd camp out in front of it. Imagine if you said to me, hey, Dr. Crom, I'll pay you $100 to sleep out overnight in front of the Ticketmaster outlet and buy my tickets for me, and this is the exchange. I'd say, yeah, that's fair. I think if we agree to the terms and other things being equal, that I'm performing a service. But the scalper in no way performs a service, but merely actually a disservice in this general sense. So yeah, I wonder what other people think about scalping, about the justice in these various situations, and how we would assess these things.